I am Wright, and I design games for Electronic Arts. I think I played chess at a very early age, but then quickly kind of discovered Go, and from a fairly young age enjoyed that, and still to this day think that's probably like the best game ever invented in terms of its simplicity, yet the depth of strategy. I got started in games. I bought a computer, an Apple II, back in 1980 or so, right after they first came out. And I was heavily into robots at that point, kind of building weird home-built robots. And I bought it to control my robots and taught myself to program it. And right about that time, I was living in New York, and there was like one computer store, one PC store in all of New York City. And they started selling some of the very first computer games that were like in shrink-wrapped, Ziploc bags. And started playing a couple of those and got just totally taken with them, these like little simulations. And then started learning about simulation programming and AI and stuff like that. And found that I was wasting so much time with that computer that I thought, I better start, making some money at this, or I'm just going to blow all my money on this computer. So that's when I decided to make my first game. Probably Gary Carlston at Broderbund Software. That was where I sold my first game. They decided to publish Wright on Bungling Bay. And for many years thereafter, Gary, I think, kind of became my mentor in business. The Carlston brothers that ran Broderbund were just, the nicest guys you'd ever meet. They were enjoying what they were doing. They treated everybody very fairly and honestly. And I'd say he was kind of a great mentor for me in the games industry. I went to about 5 years of college, but never got a degree. Studied a lot of weird things from like architecture to mechanical engineering to whatever. Really, I think, most of what I've learned in games was self-taught, and I've always enjoyed learning. In some sense, I was kind of disillusioned by formal education because it was so structured. And when I was a kid, I went to Montessori school up to about 6th grade. And after I left Montessori school, the rest of my education seemed like it was downhill. It was like overly structured, and I wasn't kind of going in the directions that I was motivated to go in. So when I've been freeform and allowed to kind of pursue the things that interest me, I can learn them very fast, and I really enjoy doing that, which is kind of why, one of the reasons why I enjoyed the games industry was that I can kind of pick a subject, whatever it is, research it, have fun, kind of build a game out of it, and then my interests can kind of bring me wherever they go, as opposed to me kind of being stuck in learning accounting methods or something. I like making stuff. And the kind of games that we make is actually kind of a level above that, where we're making things that allow other people to make stuff. And it's really interesting to see people get creative leverage with tools and to make stuff, that surprises them. And in some sense, I get kind of the same enjoyment, where we're making those tools that we then give to players that they make stuff with, and we see the stuff indirectly that they made through our tools, In some sense, it's kind of like seeing these imaginative worlds come to life, on the computer. The computer to me is like really cool just because of the fact that it's like this amplifier for your imagination, where your imagination can take form and then you can show it to other people and people can interact with it, and it becomes kind of tangible. Well, some people will consider a game a financial success if it sells so many units. Other people might consider a game a success if it has a certain transformative experience. And you can say that of almost any piece of art. When somebody experiences that piece of art, do they walk away a different person than before they saw it or interacted with it? So, I think that there is some connection between the two. There's also accessibility. You might make this great thing that, 3 people in the world can understand and appreciate. Or you might make this thing that's not quite so great, but 1 million people can get some little benefit out of it. And really, I think you need to look at the two together. How many people is it affecting and how deeply is it affecting them? And you multiply those two numbers, and to me, that's kind of the impact that art has on society. I think games need to engage your imagination. The best games I played, the ones that have really stuck with me, are ones that I'm playing in my head when I'm not in front of the game, which means that I'm able to, in some sense, download a sparser, more abstract representation of the game and be working out strategies, or what am I going to do next time I'm sitting in front of the computer, or interacting with that game. And in some sense, I'm able to play the game, I'm able to offload it, download it into my imagination, and keep playing it even when I'm not actually playing it. I think the game industry is starting to take the path of the film industry, where it's getting very risk adverse. Part of that is the development budgets are getting so incredibly expensive that it feels so risky to take a chance on something nobody's ever seen before. People tend to instead chase genres. Whatever the best-selling game was last year, everybody says we want, World of Warcraft or whatever it was this year. We want a better version of that. If you actually go back historically and look at kind of what the big games were every year, they were usually really big games because they were well done, well-tuned and polished, etc. And they also had a certain amount of kind of novelty relative to things that were preceding them. So kind of chasing the last big thing, in some sense, is, while it might lower your downside, you're never going to capture the upside that made them a big hit in the first place. So I think that's probably the biggest danger right now, is that because of the budgets, people tend toward that risk-adverse strategy, and it tends to kind of squash innovation. But occasionally, I think we're starting to see now the type of people playing games, the type of games they're playing, we're starting to see things like Guitar Hero and Rock Band, the Wii, games that are really different than what preceded them. And they're, for the most part, enjoying great success, which is, in some sense, this feels to me like the second or third renaissance of gaming because of that. If you're talking about designers, the biggest advice I would give to aspiring game designers is to study design from other fields. Outside of games, outside of computers and technology. Look at, architecture, look at fine art, movie making to some degree, although I think we've taken too much from there. But there are huge amounts of things that you can draw design inspiration from, down from industrial engineering, how you, design a teacup, to landscape architecture. And I think it's those fields that are going to kind of bring us into new creative areas, rather than us kind of rehashing the same old, Dungeons and Dragons, Tolkien worlds over and over again. I'm not sure if you'd call it a story. My favorite book, that I can't even remember how many times I've read, over 10, was always Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Robert Pirsig. There's a story there, but it's mostly a book about philosophy. I've always, at a very deep level, been very motivated by the idea of artificial intelligence, and in some degree, to a lesser degree, more particular robots. But artificial intelligence is something that I would really love to spend a few years deeply pursuing in kind of an academic sense. That's one aspiration. I could probably think of 50 others, It would probably be some sort of design or artistic profession, possibly architecture, filmmaking, toy design. I used to race. I wouldn't mind doing racing again, auto racing. I don't think I would want to be a crab fisherman in Alaska. My favorite artist is probably Stanley Kubrick. Possibly my utter fascination with Care Bears. Yeah, I can tell you more than you want to know about Care Bears. Oh, you want to know about Care Bears? Yeah, because they live in Care-a-Lot, which is above the forest of feelings, where the Care Bear cousins live, which is above Earth. But the Care Bear cousins aren't even bears. They're like lions and monkeys and things, but they call them Care Bear cousins. Yeah. They have these like particle beam weapons in their stomach, and when they get really upset, they fire this like Star Wars thing. They're cool. And the stars, they like lord over these little stars. They're like the slave race to the Care Bears. Probably Holy Crap. I like the way you can deliver that. It has a lot of totally different deliveries. Like, something really cool. Holy crap! That's cool. Somebody stepped on your foot. Holy crap! You stepped on my foot. Not quite as good as fuck, but it's a little bit more nostalgic. I like a lot of old '70s rock and roll. Genesis, Jethro Tull, stuff like that. That's kind of nostalgic music. I like some of the more new age fusion stuff like Enigma, Delirium. It kind of runs the gamut. I just got the new Advance Wars on the DS and been playing that a lot. And Rock Band. Probably those two the most. I've been playing Call of Duty 4 a bit also.